Welcome to Mind Shift Power Podcast, a show for teenagers and the adults who work with them, where we have raw and honest conversations. I'm your host, Fatima Bey, the Mind Shifter. And welcome, everyone. We have today with us Donna C. Moss. You've heard her before. She's here in a different capacity today. And we also have Ariel Moss, her daughter. So we're talking about different generational topics. So Ariel is 23. I am 50. And Donna is 62. All three of us are from in the Northeast of the United States. And all three of us are from three different generations. So I'm going to do something a little different today. I'm going to break down what the generations are called and their age ranges, because people are always confused about this. So I'm just going to clarify it from the beginning. So the baby boomers were born between 1946 and 64. They are 60 to 78 right now. So that would be Donna. Generation X was born between 1965 and 1980. They are between 44 and 59 right now. That's Generation X. That's me. Millennials were born between 1981 and 1996. They are currently 28 to 43 years old. And by the way, this recording is in November of 2024. So if you're listening to this later, those ages will change. Generation Z, are born between 1997 and 2012. Currently between the ages of 12 and 27, which is all the teenagers and young adults. And Generation Alpha, those are the babies right now. They are 11 years and younger. They're born between 2013 and now. So now that we have broken that down, Donna, why don't you tell me what you said to me that prompted this conversation and therefore this episode?
If I remember correctly, I think I was telling you that Ariel told me that for the first time her generation came together for something happy and momentous was the full solar eclipse that happened earlier this year. Mm-hmm. She told me it was the first time that they came together for something positive in her life. And she was born into 9/11, and she just finished college through COVID and a lot of problems in between. So it was nice for me to hear that there was something that they all came together for.
So Ariel, can you explain that a little bit in your own words, what you were talking about?
Yeah, like my mom said, I was born right into 9/11, so I think specifically my year and my generation was kind of used to having tragedy happen, unfortunately, and I think we're known for being pretty resilient, and so I think with resilience it means that there was at some point hardship, and so this eclipse just kind of felt like one thing that we were all a part of that had no, good or bad to it. And it was just kind of like a community experience. And, everyone was really excited about it. And it was just kind of the first time that many people felt like they were coming together about something that wasn't like so horrible.
I think that that's a very fascinating point, Ariel. Most of the generations, my generation and your mom's generation, just anybody older, we don't think about the fact that this is all you know. Tragedy for your generation is the norm, and it is all you know. For us, it came about later in life, and so we have a different perspective. And I think it's important. I also want to mention, you heard the age difference between Ariel and her mother. Her mother, Donna, had Ariel at 40. So there's a bigger age gap. Most people around Ariel's age, their parents are about my age, around 50. So, well, roughly. So when I talk about the differences between generations, I think it's important to note that most of the people Ariel's age, their parents, the people talking to them about whatever, are my age. And then their grandparents are more likely anyway, Donna's age. So, but back to what you were saying. I think it's important that for all of us to really understand that is not a minor detail. The fact that you grew up just thinking of tragedy as normal. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, I think so.
So I think that makes a difference. Don't you, Donna? If I'm asking Donna because Donna's also a therapist, so she gets into people's heads a lot, very psychological. So it's a very it's a very appropriate question for her. Um, Growing up in a way where tragedy is normal, does that affect your brain?
Well, first of all, every generation's going to say that they had their own trauma, right?
Hmm.
I mean, the fact that I'm a boomer means that I was born out of World War II.
Hmm.
So can't each, I would argue each generation has their challenges, and that's okay. But as Ariel said, we need to try to do a better job of communicating where we're coming from. That's
Yeah, I agree. In my generation, I grew up in the 80s. So anybody my age remembers Breakfast Club. My favorite movie was I'm Gonna Get You Sucker, and what was the Eddie Murphy movie? Coming to America. Like I remember all that stuff. I was a teenager and a kid during some of that stuff. So for my generation, we didn't have wars like you did, right, John? You had, well, no, that's not true. We did have.
Vietnam.
You had Vietnam. We had Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Um, in what was it, 92? Forgive me
Yeah,
if
about
I'm
that. Yeah.
recalling I think I'm naming the war. No, I'm sorry. It was Iraq, not Afghanistan.
Oh,
It was Iraq. But do you remember any, Ariel, as your age, do you think of war as something that has happened in your lifetime?
Most of my life, I would say no.
Hmm.
I More recently, it's changed a bit, but I
Hmm.
think growing up, I remember feeling like, we would learn about it in school, and it sounded so big and like it was the biggest thing going on in
Hmm.
those times. And I think that's partly the way we learn about it, and partly because there was more known about what was going on. And I always remember feeling like I wouldn't even know if there was a war going on because nobody talks about it.
Here's why I
Um,
find that. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, that's it.
Here's why I find that response interesting. There has been quite a few wars, big ones, in your lifetime, but the fact
Hmm.
that they're not seen as a major part of life, I think that is something different for your generation because I don't think it's just you. I think for the younger generations, it's not seen that way. Let's talk about one of the reasons why I think that's true. Technology. Technology is always going to increase, is always going to be different from generation to generation. That's always going to be true. However, technology for my generation didn't really, it wasn't like, social media, your phones, being digitally attached to everything. That wasn't a major part of our lives growing up. My generation, we were in our 20s before that really hit the fans. Around the time of the iPhone is what most experts say is when the digital era really began to take a hold of our culture. So for you, how do you view digital stuff, like everything technology wise? Ariel, I'm sorry.
Um, I think there's good and bad. I think growing up, there were times that if I didn't have my phone, maybe, middle school drama wouldn't have been so bad. And
Mm-hmm.
there was
True.
definitely a lot of hiding behind screens. As I got older, I think I started to appreciate it a bit more
Okay.
in the way of like, you can connect with people. I don't live near most of my childhood friends anymore, and so it's,
Mm-hmm.
there's a connecting aspect to it, as we know. Um, and then I think a big thing with that was during COVID, the way people responded to having technology. And I always said that I kind of appreciated it because it would give me some like kind of inspiration. I would scroll for a little while and see someone cooking something or see someone making, arts and crafts or whatever it was. And I felt like that kind of just was inspired. Like, not, it would give me something to do. It
Mm-hmm.
would kind of get me motivated, which
So,
isn't always true, but
so the digital connections you saw as good. But for you, do you feel like you've been digitally connected your entire life?
yeah, I think, most of my life that I can remember, um, my parents were always, I think, like cameras were still new. And so my parents were always taking pictures and videos when we were kids, which, now I'm grateful for because it's fun to see those. But so I think it kind of started with that. And then when I was in about like middle school, I got a phone and eventually an iPhone. And just kind of went from there. I don't really, yeah, I feel like I've always had one.
Okay. And Donna, when did you become digitally connected? Because obviously your generation didn't grow up with everything being digitally connected to you. But
Right. So, like I was saying earlier, I grew up in a joyful, free range time. Where after school, I usually had sports, and then we just roamed around and around, free on our bicycles until the sun went down and our parents called us in for dinner. So there was something incredibly carefree about that, and I think my friends and I agree it was something beautiful about it. We had a very close connection, and partly because no one was looking for us. There was trust in the world.
so
So, but
go ahead.
but the good news is that for me, I was an early adopter of tech, and that's one of the reasons why I can stay hip with the teenagers that I treat in therapy, is because it helped. The phone has helped me become more organized, which is a big thing that I need support with. So,
So what I'm hearing is that you adapted
yeah,
to the new technology. You didn't
yeah.
just say, "I don't need that," you youngins. You actually took the time to adapt and found a way for it to be helpful to you.
Yeah, well, I liked it, because if you gave me a piece of paper, I would lose it. But on the computer, I could thrive a little more in the work environment.
For my generation, we because I'm in between you two, and we grew up with technology arising. So we had computers, and that was like a really big thing when I was younger because IBM was just coming up and they were just really they weren't in every household yet. And when I was, I think, in college is when, remember the old fashioned AOL internet, which
Hmm.
Ariel, you wouldn't even know because you weren't born yet, but we used to have dial up when internet first came on. And it was like such a big deal. And not everybody could really have it, but it wasn't an everyday thing. So I'm kind of the in between generation where I adapted because I was still young enough to be used to it. A lot of people your generation, Donna, still aren't that hip on tech. Now I know a lot of people who are,
I know, thank God
but
I am, but a lot are not. And it was funny because my father called himself a media expert, and he couldn't click on a link even. He was a book publisher.
oh wow.
But if you sent him a link, he was like, "What is this?"
Well, he probably was a media expert for his time.
Yeah.
For real, they did things the old-fashioned way and still read newspapers and all
And
that good
marked
stuff.
up manuscripts that you had to
Yeah.
send across the country this big by
Oh, wow.
mail with a
Oh my
red
god, yeah, you're
pencil.
right, they
Yeah.
would have had to do that.
Yeah.
That's a big, big difference.
Hmm.
But I think that, the digital aspect is a big deal. Now, you were telling me, Ariel, I want you to repeat to the audience some of the things you were telling me earlier about, what you had to say about, the digital era and just tell them what you were saying earlier.
Um, I think, like I was saying, it can like separate and bring together, but I think, there's with parents and like different generations trying to understand it. I think it's really important to like put in that effort to at least be willing to try and like understand and learn and adapt, like we've been talking about. And I think a lot of parents, I think, can be a little bit scared from the technology because if you don't understand it, I mean, you don't know what is going on and where you're sending things, and it can be a little bit scary. And I think, being willing to learn from the generation that does have a better grasp on that is important, and like trusting the younger kids, even though they're younger, we have a different kind of understanding with it.
So I want to go into another, I think, related topic. When it comes to dating, and when it comes to sending out sexual pictures. I'm going to be real for the audience, adults who don't realize this. It is extremely common and extremely average for teenagers to send pictures of their body parts to each other, to be miniature porn stars through texting. That is actually very common for this current generation. Tell me what you were saying about that earlier, Ariel.
I mean, in my experience, it was like you were saying, very common, mostly in high school. I think middle school to high school when people are still exploring and kind of like can hide behind a screen. And,
Hmm.
a big part of that is Snapchat, where everything is temporary. So it seems like you can't save things, and that seems safer. Although we know now there's ways to save things and copy things. But as I got older, I think it became less and less. But I think it was definitely something I remember in school trying teachers and like older people trying to scare us out of it. And they would do it in ways that we couldn't really take seriously. Like they explained that, oh, if you send one picture, it'll go to some random man in the middle of nowhere that you don't know. And I don't think people at that age really cared about that. Like that wasn't really the part of it that was so problematic, although maybe true, but I think it was more problematic that, your peers would find out or people would talk about it or people would see copies of pictures. And I think that just created like a big, it fed into that kind of stigma of that not being okay and people would feel really insecure. And I think a lot of that's changing as like sex work has become more acceptable and there's less judgment towards it all. But as a kid, you need to know the risks. And I don't think the parents really fully understood how to portray that to us.
Okay, that's an honest answer. I think that is still somewhat true, actually. I think a lot of people in your generation still don't get how damaging it is to do that stuff, and because it's so common, and it's like if you try to do something later, it'll matter. We see it all the time when we look at older adults right now, and they don't think about the fact that you're going to be an older adult one day, and you're going to want to not have things pulled out on you.
Right. But now if you privatize it, you can make a lot of money.
Well, that is true. So we have a generation that thinks that, showing all your body parts and doing stuff on screen is good and okay. I know for my generation, it still wasn't. And I'm assuming, Donna, that you are going to say the same thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, we don't understand it at all, but I can see the result of it. I mean, I had one of my earliest clients was hospitalized because her nude went around the school. She was 15. She was hospitalized out of mortification. If that's a diagnosis, then she had it.
Yeah.
Out of just humiliation. Doesn't mean that she's scarred for life. But a lot of kids I talk to have taken a hit on their self-esteem through no fault of their own, just by getting too much feedback and too much attention on the wrong thing.
Yeah, I definitely.
Well, there's often a person on the other side of the screen taking pictures, and they're at fault too. I don't think it's totally, most cases it's like you trust somebody and you think that you can send something intimate and you're like exploring that realm of intimacy, but often it's the other person who messes it up for them and betrays trust. And, you have to be careful, but I think it created a lot of trust issues with relationships. And I think I see that now, for a lot of different reasons, but you see it even at my age that, boys are really hard to trust. And usually it's boys, but you never know.
Well, yeah, that's an honest answer. And I know that you're speaking for a lot of people when you say that, Ariel. It's definitely not just you. Ariel, as someone who is part of that younger generation, what is it that you would like to say to the older generations, your mother's generation and mine, the older people? What do you have to say to us?
I think, like I kind of said before, it's really important for us to learn from you, but also for the older generation to be willing to see things from a new perspective and like kind of the accepting of the fact that things are different and that we, grow up in a different world. And just the willingness to understand that and to, even if you can't fully understand it, understanding that it is different, whether you can kind of get on board or not.
Why is it different? Why should we listen to you?
I think we have a different kind of level of connectedness, like whether maybe it was better or worse to not have a phone and nobody know where you are. There is some like bliss to that, but I think as an overall community of a generation, I think we're closer knit than any other generation.
Really?
Like,
why do you think that?
I mean, I think social media has a big role in that, if something happens, we can all talk about it online. And like, that's where a lot of people are reverting to talk about things and to open up and to learn. And so I think we kind of get a lot of the same information from each other. And it's kind of this like fluid exchange of experience and information and all this stuff that, I don't think you could have before having the level of social media that we have now. And yes, sometimes it's problematic and that's, we have to have a balance, but I think that it brings us together in a lot of ways. And like I was saying with COVID, like I think that was a big part of it for me, is that it felt like I'm feeling all these crazy things about what's going on in the world, and now I know that all these other millions of people my age are also feeling that way.
I think you made a very interesting statement there, that you feel like your generation is more close knit than any of us, because of the fact that you can talk about things online, whereas we could only talk about things on the phone or when we saw each other physically somewhere, right, Donna? And
Absolutely.
then, and yeah, you're right. That is something I hadn't quite thought about that way. So you just did a little mind shift on me. The fact that you guys are able to communicate, specifically in that way, and we couldn't. And I think that you guys are, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Ariel, I think that you guys are much more open to talking about issues than our generations were, because we were always taught to suppress things and pretend. I also think that you guys are taught to pretend, just in a different way.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And now it's like, your parents and your family aren't the only people you have to talk to if you have, like, about growing up and about life.
Yeah,
Like, you
yeah.
have kind of more of a community to reach out to.
How do you feel about our youth having respect for their elders?
Having respect for elders.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think respect both ways is important.
I think it
I
is
think
too.
there was, like, my mom was saying something wonderful about not knowing where anybody is and just being kind of in that moment. And I think that a lot of us look for that and try to connect to that, and, disconnect to reconnect is a saying that I've always known. No, I just think that we both have things to learn both ways.
I agree. I think it's I think what you just said is key. I'm still, yeah, you guys are able to communicate and connect in a way that our generations really couldn't, not on that level anyway. We could connect with individuals. There's some of us that did, but as a generation, no. But I also think that you brought a good point about the eclipse. There was the first time that your generation was doing something together, with, like, together with other generations too, and that was abnormal for your generation. Not it was it's not a it wasn't abnormal for mine or your mother's generation. And I think that's a difference that we should be considering and looking at, for those of us who are older, and trying to understand. And I just want to reiterate, Ariel's thoughts on, we really, as adults, need to take the time to actually listen to the younger generation instead of talking at them. And it's something I'm constantly saying. You really are, you're going to gain so much if you actually take the time to listen. Now, where Donna is different than her peers is the fact that she is a therapist and specifically works with young adults and teenagers. So she already understands a lot of these things, but she understands it because she's made a point to try and understand. Right, Donna?
Absolutely. That's correct. Yeah.
And what
It's
do you have to say to your generation?
right. Well, I was thinking when you were talking about that kid name, I think his name is David Hogue, out of the Parkland shootings. He's
Mhm.
now like an adult, but he was present for that shooting, and he's becoming more political. And I think what kids are not understanding is that everything is political now. If you want to have a
Right.
baby, if you want to vote, be able to vote freely, if you want to live in a red state or a blue state, everything's political. So can't really shy away from it. You got to be engaged. Otherwise, we're all screwed.
I kind of agree. I do think that is a valid point. Everything is political now. Whereas,
I
go ahead, Ariel.
I disagree.
Okay, why?
I mean, I think
Well,
politics are important, and I think, you have to be aware of what's going on and your decisions. But I think that mindset of that everything is political is exhausting. And, I think you have to be able to separate a little bit and, like, enjoy the simple things in life without turning everything back to politics.
so when you say, well, this is what I'm hearing, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. What I'm hearing you say is that everything doesn't need to be political.
I
And
think,
what
yeah,
Donna is saying is that everything has become political, which
Mm-hmm.
to me are two different statements. I'm kind of in between both of you, actually, not just generationally, but even on this topic. I do think that, I understand why Donna would say everything is political now, because she grew up at a time where everything wasn't turned into something political. And right now, everything is turned, just about everything is turned into something political. But I also see where you're coming from, Ariel, in that we do need to care about politics and we do need to make statements about things and not just sit by and accept everything. And am I correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think politics right now specifically are very much on this topic of like ages because,
Mm-hmm.
most of the candidates don't have the understanding that a lot of the young voters do. And I think that's frustrating for a lot of people. It's like a huge gap in generation between who we're voting for and who we are.
That makes sense to me. That statement makes sense to me. I want to dive a little further, a little deeper into something what you just said as well. You said it is exhausting to hear that, and I know that sentiment is not just coming from Ariel. She represents probably most people in her generation with that frustration. The frustration of hearing the older adults saying, "Oh, everything's political now," but saying it in a way that is brushing off issues like, oh, you're just being political instead of actually hearing what the issue is about. Am I correct, Ariel?
Yeah.
Is that
I
where the
think it's
frustration is coming from?
yeah, I think it's quick to turn things to politics before discussing it on its own.
Okay. That's what I thought. And I understand where you're coming from with that. And that does make sense to me. Where because in the reason I'm saying this is because it's not just Donna who's going to say that, just most people in her generation are going to say that because of the fact that when they grew up, everything wasn't turned into something major. Some things
Right.
probably should have been that weren't. And
Well,
We actually just had this conversation, my mom and I.
oh, I didn't know that.
But
But
just saying, yeah, go ahead.
I think that I am understanding why and this isn't just Donna, why people of her generation make statements like that. And I see where they're coming from, but I also see where you're coming from with the frustration of hearing that over and over again from people that are including that with being dismissive.
mm-hmm.
I don't think that what she's saying is invalid. I think what she's saying is very valid because she grew up with a different experience. But I also think that your generation's feeling about stop dismissing everything we're saying is also valid because and again, I think that comes from not understanding each other. And the fact that when your generation hears statements like that from her generation, you guys do need to understand that they grew up differently. They didn't grow up with everything being turned into something because we didn't have social media to blow it up.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But at
That
the
was the
same,
point I made to
yeah.
my mom was
Oh, okay.
like I've been hearing a lot of people telling us, "Oh, this is the most important election ever." And I said to my parents, "I think I've heard that my whole life. Every election my entire life has been the
Yeah,
most important election at that
yeah,
time."
that's true. And it's like crying wolf. You get tired of hearing it.
Right. And we also had a lot more benefits right after we wanted to end the Vietnam War. I was still too young to understand that. But after that, there were many years of sort of quiet until then we had that gas, like where you had to line up for odd even on your license plate to get gasoline. Do you remember that?
I wasn't there.
That was like the biggest thing that happened to us. It wasn't
Okay.
terrible, but it was
I think I heard about it though.
uh-huh.
I think I heard about it.
But thank
So
God there were also lots of long periods of quiet.
that's interesting. I don't think this younger generation has experienced that at all. They don't
No.
know what quiet is.
Mm-hmm.
But again, because of the digital connection, and I'm talking to the audience right now, I really want you guys to hear what's being said here and just do some deep thinking. This episode isn't about right or wrong, about portraying anything. It's just to plant some thought seeds because I think many of you need to understand each other and you're not trying to. And I just want you to hear from a generation that's not your own. So no matter how old you are, you're hearing from a generation that's not your own between one of us. And I think it's important that we try to understand each other, at least make an effort at understanding each other. That's something that all three of us totally agree on. It's important to listen to others and try to understand their experience, even if you don't understand it. But the effort at understanding means that if you're making an effort to understand me, I'm probably more likely to listen to you.
But I'm also really worried and anxious about for my kids. Like, what if, God forbid, they need an abortion or they get in a crossfire of gun violence? Or there's tremendous fear now for parents.
And what were you going to say, Ariel?
I was going to add on to what you were saying. Yeah, I think, to add to that is like to remove hate from it all. Like, I feel like I try really hard to remove like judgment and anger when talking about politics. Like I think we all need to practice disagreeing and not hating each other for it.
Girl, can you
Like
say
you
that
don't have
like
to understand and you don't have to totally agree, but that doesn't mean we have to like totally hate each other and not listen to each other at all because then no one's going to learn anything.
I completely agree like 1,000,000%.
Amen.
Can you teach that to some of these older adults who are supposed to be freaking adults? Who act like 10-year-olds when you disagree with them. It's very frustrating. And the crazy thing is, I hear more. To me, that's an adult mindset. That is a grown up, mature, not adult, more so mature mindset is to think that way. I hear more of statements like that coming from your generation than mine or older, and I think that's a large problem too. But I completely agree, and I think you're totally right about that. All three of us agree on that. You know, we it's okay to disagree. It's not okay to be violent. I think that's where the line should be drawn, because there needs to be a line. When the disagreement turns into violence, then that is to me, it's a different topic. But just to disagree that I want to vote. I believe in when it comes to money, what Republicans believe. Well, I believe when it comes to social stuff, what the Democrats believe. Okay, we can have those conversations, but it doesn't mean I need to kill you. It doesn't mean I need to punch
Right.
you in the face or try
Or even
to.
dismiss you.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
even before it gets to violence. Like
Or
if
take
someone says,
away
"Oh,
your
you,"
rights. Take away your rights.
but if someone says, "Oh, I don't agree," I don't want to have that conversation.
Uh,
I think that's where the problem starts. Is like you should be okay with listening to something that's not your opinion and being a little bit
Right.
outside your comfort zone.
But I want to add, it doesn't mean you need to have the same conversation over and over again. Once you've had that conversation with one, 2 or 3 times with the same mindset, then you've had it. But you're right. You need to at least make that effort. And a lot of people, they don't. They're just stuck in their ways. And I do find that your younger generation, Ariel, seems to be a lot more understanding of that. But I also think that you guys were taught, you were taught different values than we were. And you guys don't even see it. The older generation sees it the most because they've been around longest, obviously. But the values that we've all been taught, they are all different. And I'm speaking in general terms, of course, because our own household, individual, differences are play into that too. But I'm talking about as a whole culture. All three of our generations are just dramatically been taught different things. I always like to put it this way. Donna's generation, they grew up on Earth. They played in the grass. They were a part of the Earth. Your generation is growing up on Mars. This other generation is growing up in a whole nother galaxy. They're not even in our galaxy. Like that's just dramatically how different we're being raised as cultures. And I think all the more reason why we need to take the time to listen to one another. So if you're listening and you're young, take the time to listen to your grandma, listen to your mom or your dad or whoever who's a different generation to see how things were for them. And if you're older, 40 plus, I would say, take the time to listen to somebody who's 23 or younger and hear their opinions. They're probably going to be very different than yours because they're growing up differently. But it matters that you actually try to listen. Because I'll tell you what, Donna, you can respond here on this one. One of the reasons your patients listen to you, your clients listen to you, isn't just because you're a therapist. It's because you actually listen to them first.
yeah, I think that's 100% right. It does comfort. You have to have an openness to begin these conversations and a willingness to tolerate some discomfort. Believe me, I don't like to argue. I don't get anything out of it.
Mm-hmm.
But once in a while, I can get uncomfortable or get passionate without, any interference from extremes.
That's why she married a lawyer.
I'm surrounded by lawyers. No, I
Right.
don't enjoy it. I really don't. But
But it's good practice.
it's good to have some confidence.
Absolutely. Well, I really enjoyed this conversation, and there's so many other topics that I did not go into today because it would have been too long. But I really have enjoyed talking to the two of you, and thank you so much for being open and willing to have this conversation. And I'm hoping that you listeners did get something out of this.
Thank you, Fatima.
Yeah, thank you.
And now for a mind shifting moment. There is a main principle I want you to walk away with today, and that is listening. You heard lots of things in here. I'm sure you agreed with some things and disagreed with others, and that's okay. The main thing is that you heard something different than what you're used to, or different than your own mindset. I want to emphasize how important it is to listen to people who have a different perspective than us. If you do this, it will make you more of a balanced person. Do you only listen to people who agree with you? I promise you, if you do, you have a very imbalanced mind and imbalanced thinking. I just want you to think about how much do you actually listen to people who have a different perspective from you. Thank you for listening to Mindshift Power Podcast. Please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel at The Mindshifter. If you have any comments, topic suggestions, or would like to be a guest on the show, please visit fatimabay.com/podcast. Remember, there's power in shifting your thinking. Tune in for next week.